All right, welcome to part two. I think I tried to break this at a good spot because I had a follow up question I wanted to ask. Sorry, part two. I'm not giving context. So last time we talked about kind of the stories that are in our lives that make their way into books and that inform stories. And Dave said that he doesn't like to pull from real life. And then my follow up was going to be, but
yeah, before you dig into the follow-up, just to be clear, there's no right or wrong way on any of this. So for me, both are enjoyable. Dave does treat the story as a more sacred place. Johnny and I treat the story as, it's almost like with Dave wants to tell I don't know, the most real, most authentic version of that story, right? Like there is a pristine version and he wants to excavate that. For Johnny and I think we're approaching it as we're going to tell the version that only we could tell. This story is only going to exist because of what we put into the story. So naturally putting as much of ourselves into that story is what makes it our thing. So it's a totally different approach.
Well, it's probably worth mentioning that our approach isn't frivolous. There have actually been times when Sean wanted to include something, and I've kind of gone, I don't know that I can.
Not at this point. Not at this point in the story. We're too late. Things have got too serious. There was one of those just in the last book. I don't remember what it was.
No, it's the current book, and it was a character name that you thought was really funny, and I said that I because the difference is if we're writing something that is meant to be first and foremost funny, like that's kind of the primary aim of it, then anything goes. But then anything else would go, maybe I could say. And but in a book that once it's gotten kind of serious, then it does raise a flag. Then it does say, "Hey, look at me! I'm trying to be funny." The story does, and that I usually don't like. I know that this isn't a story pulled from real life, but maybe it was. Like I feel like it was something where we saw something maybe when we were together, something real in real life, and then you adapted it. Actually, I think it was, and it was in one of the Unicorn Western books where you're talking about like an Edward celebration.
No, I know exactly what this was, because this was the first time this came up in our partnership. Because Unicorn Western had been fun. Like it was. I mean, I call you after dinner and like, dude, you got to make chili sacred, and you like rolled with that shit, like whatever crazy idea there was. But the books were earlier in the series. Things got really serious around book 7, and then by book 8,
I had 8 of them.
There's 9.
Oh my god!
A 250,000 word
joke into the ground forever.
No, do you realize there's 500,000 words that I have penned directly at your humorous expense?
That's commitment.
Well, I mean, the story did get very serious, and I remember we were at this Chinese buffet, and there were you could get cotton candy on these little like horns, and when they were all done, Haley had one of them and she held it up to her head and she said, "Look, it's like Edward." And
she was like what, 12 at the time or 13, something like that?
12. I mean, we were still in Cincinnati, so actually 10, 9 maybe. I mean, little. And so I suggested to Johnny, hey, what if like, because Edward the unicorn's like a celebrity at this point, what if all the little kids like are doing that, and they're like, "Hey, I'm Edward," and they're galloping around, and he's like, "Yeah, maybe 3 books ago, asshole." Like that's just doesn't fit tonally at all what we're doing right now.
Right, having a celebration with it would have had to have a certain tone to it, and that sort of thing, like, because I do think that a lot of those things you see that the author's trying to have fun, even if it's a serious story. You can tell that they're having fun with it, and the tone of that book just didn't work. And so we do weigh those things. But to bring this back around, so Dave, you said you don't mind real life, you don't use real stories, and yet I would argue that from what I've read and heard about CI books, those are way more autobiographical than anything that Sean and I have done.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so, but
what's the line?
Well, I don't take actual of that. I don't like a lot of my stuff is born from tragedy, and if it's tragedy that happened to me, then I want to change it up. I don't want to do it exactly because it feels, I don't know. It should be somebody else's story, not mine. if it's like any number of horrible things I've read in the news, then I definitely want to skew away from that because I don't want to belittle somebody's actual experience or their life. So I kind of, I don't know, a collective misery of everything that has ever occurred, and just kind of pick and choose from it and try to hew far away from the actual events as I can.
But you're clearly inspired by them in a way that I couldn't write those stories, for instance.
Well,
so what are you pulling and what are you leaving?
The feeling,
for instance, that the type, right? Like, so I was going to say the type of person who does the bullying, it feels like is almost an archetype that you have experienced and known. I would say that the feelings of the person who is being bullied or attacked also.
Well, okay, that's a good point, Johnny. So Dave writes in archetypes much, much more than what we'll do. So Dave will have, it doesn't matter what the actual story is. Here's a good example. So we're developing a story. I have no idea when this will even come out, but it's coming out in the world of Invasion at some point, and it's going to be something that Dave and I work on together. But the actual outline, the very first version of this outline, was dropped off on my desk a week ago by Joel, and Joel's job, like what I tasked him with, was, okay, dude, this is going to be like, it has to have all of Dave's sensibilities in it. And everybody like in the company at this point knows what that means. And he really rocked it. Like, you'll see, Dave, it's got like a mom getting violently murdered as she gives birth to her baby.
Pages ripped right from Dave's diary.
Yeah, no, it really does have some very Dave tropey things. It's got a false prophet.
Christmas.
It's got a false prophet. It's got like a freak show, gifted child. It's got a lot of Daveisms. But it's like Dave will write in tones. If we all said, "Hey, write a Dave story," we kind of, it would be like
I kind of hate that I'm so predictable. I want to go away from that all now.
Well, but only you can do that. Like, Johnny and I are really, really adventurous. So Dave, when you and I want to tell a story, I definitely know what ground we're going to tread. And so it's like, hey, how can we get a big idea within, this kind of framework, where it's almost the opposite. When Johnny and I are picking at a story, it's like the idea can be anything. Like, there is no, like, we will or will not approach that subject. It's once we decide on that subject, how will we dial in on that? And I think we figured that out really early, because we went from Unicorn Western to The Beam, which were tonal opposites. And then we did that thing where, hey, let's write 6 pilots. And then we did that. Right? And they all had different tones. So on the dramatic side, we had Robot Proletariat, Namaste, and Cursed, which were all very, very different in tone. We got very dry horror, kind of intelligent, classic, humorous sci-fi, and like real bloody revenge. Like, but that's how I knew, okay, well, we can kind of write anything, so let's just decide where our voice is. But yeah, I think your daily life has a lot to do with, how you write and what you think about it and what kind of pictures you want to take with your words.
Yeah, I think I tend to write from an outsider's perspective, because that's how I spent most of my life. But now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of depressing, so fuck it.
Well, but it almost seems like, I don't see, this is another impression that I have. I don't think you're necessarily drawing from life in the way that Sean and I draw from life. For me, it feels like it's a grab bag, and it's like, oh, cool, look what's in there. It feels like you're more haunted by it, and you can't not write those things.
Definitely. It is, it's an exorcism.
So, okay, I actually want to
cleaning out my closet.
Does it help?
Yes, and sometimes it's very painful. It's a little bit of both. It's cathartic. I just feel a need to tell certain kinds of stories, I guess. I don't know how to explain it better than that. It's just what I've always felt.
All right, whose turn is it to actually ask a question?
Oh man, actual questions. You.
Okay, then I'm going to go with Dave, and I'm going to ask him.
Do you remember when Dave wasn't going to talk on this show?
I totally do, but I prefer this version. Was there ever an event in your life that defied explanation?
Ooh, I actually have one of these.
I've had a few events. When I was a kid, I had two houses behind me. I lived on a corner, like at the end of the street, and there were two backyards behind mine. So one of them was my best friends at the time, two brothers, and I had my parents had washed my curtains, so I had no curtains covering my windows, and that scared me. Because there was another time, that's another unexplained event. I have a few unexplained events.
I have a few too.
There was one time I was before again, same situation. Curtains weren't being washed. I was doing my homework, and I was like 7 or 8, I think. And I was doing homework, and I was kneeling, and I was like writing on the bed. And I looked up, and I see something or somebody in the window looking at me. But it did not look like a person. It looked like the most.
Was it Johnny?
Yes, it was Johnny's abs. It looked like the most deformed person I'd ever seen, and he was almost like ghostly white. And I remember it very clearly, and it scared the shit out of me. And I went running, and I told my dad. My dad goes outside with a knife or whatever, or just his shotgun. I don't even remember. Nobody was out there. But the next day when I went to look under my window, there was an area that was like all messed up. Like somebody had been there, and I don't know. That kind of freaked me out. But the other unexplained thing was I had this dream. I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was a UFO floating over the tree that was in the backyard of my best friend's house. And I remember looking up at the UFO, and there was like a light coming down onto the tree. And then I looked into their window, because their window also faced this tree. And they were looking up at the UFO, and they were jumping up and down, and they looked at me. So the next day, I went over to their house, and I never thought it was real at all. But the next day I went to the house, and they're like, "We had the weirdest dream about you." And I said, "I had the weirdest dream about you," but I was smart enough to like not give them details, and I wanted to see if they
That's how they get you.
Yeah. We had the same exact fucking dream. And like to this day, I have no explanation for that. And I had it happen twice in my life.
Were you guys having an ayahuasca at the time?
Yes. I had it happen. I had shared dreams with the people that were next door to me twice in my life. And I find that very fucking weird and unexplainable. So yeah. I don't know.
Johnny.
One other thing. And this is
I'm glad we got this version of Dave instead of the tired one.
Shut up.
He always wakes up.
When I was 9 years old, around that time, I wanted. My mom had they used to sell those Tootsie Rolls in the bank. You know. Did you?
Well, I thought you were going to say you went to the bank to buy Tootsie Rolls. I was very confused.
No, they had it like in a bank.
Yeah.
So she had it on top of this high hutch that I couldn't reach. And I have a very vivid memory of walking over to the hutch, floating up and getting them, and then going back to the couch and laying down. But that's not the weirdest part of this story. My wife and her two sisters, when they were kids, they have distinct memories of floating up and down their fucking stairs on several occasions at night. And if you knew my wife, you would know that she has no supernatural beliefs whatsoever, and she's not like that kind of none of her sisters.
Nor did she load the dishwasher.
Nor did she load the dishwasher. All three of her sisters are like the last people in the world that would make up a story. Like, they're just not that. They're the most honest people I know. And the fact that they all had this weird ass experience, and I also had a floating experience, it's just, I don't know, it's just weird shit. So yeah.
And Johnny, what was your unexplained adventure?
I was in Europe with a friend of mine. I was backpacking through Western Europe, and we were there for like a week. And
that was a friend's joke, in case you didn't catch it, Dave.
Yeah,
what's friends? I have no friends.
Backpack. No,
friends.
The show. Backpacking through Western Europe. It's Joey's pickup line.
Like Tibidabo. Yeah. So anyway, we were in Heidelberg, and we didn't really have a lot of agenda. It was just like, we were just like, the Euro pass, you could just get on a train and go and travel for a day. And as long as you did it within one day, it was all the same price.
Yeah,
so we were in Heidelberg, Germany, and we were in this, I don't know if it was a hotel. I think it was a hotel. And as opposed to a hostel, because you do stay in hostels, and none of them were owned by Eli Roth. And we went out.
He's the one who made the Clock in Your Walls movie.
Like, oh, wow.
He went from hostel to I'm going to make kids films.
So we left.
He's working his way towards a kid's snuff film.
We left when it was before dark, and we went and we walked around the town. And then we came back, and it was after dark, and the hotel had like a foyer. So it had external doors, and then it had a set of internal doors, and then beyond that was like the reception desk and stuff. And we walked in through the first doors, and we were in the foyer, and the doors were just right there, the interior doors. And I don't know, they had a flyer on them or something. And then I just stopped, and I looked at my friend Rick, and he looked at me, and it was one of those things where like somebody had said something, but nobody had. And we sat that way for like 15 seconds. And then I said, do you feel that? Is there? And he goes, yeah, I kind of want to get out of here. There was just something inexplicably weird on a gut level when we walked into that foyer. Now Sean's kind of smiling because I've transplanted this experience of kind of, you can't say why it was weird, but it was, and something was clearly wrong, even though it clearly wasn't, to a story. Like I've told a version of this in one of our books, because it was the strength. There was nothing different. It's not like somebody had written something on the door. It's not like the flyer had been added. It was the same door we went through, but we both agreed walking in there, it was just like there was something wrong. It's the only way I can say. So we didn't go in. We were tired. We were ready to go. And so we walked out, and we walked around for another hour or so.
I call that feeling Florida, by the way.
And when we came back, it was gone. Whatever it was again the same door, but it was like, okay, we feel normal now, and we went in. There's nothing there. I mean, it's not like there's nothing objectively, but the fact that we both felt so strongly that something was wrong was worth noting, I thought, in a fiction sense.
And later that night, the place burned down.
It had that feeling. It had the feeling
it's like
did somebody die here. Yeah.
Well, it's like
that sensation.
When dogs smell something, right? And you're like, okay, they know something that we don't know, right? It's like a dog can sense something.
Like the feeling was, if we go in there right now, some bad shit's going to happen. We're going to walk in on the wrong thing. Like, I don't know, some guy going through our room or something, and then we're going to walk in and get murdered. Like, it had that feeling of it, and we just walked away.
No, go ahead, Dave.
I'm typically very skeptical of supernatural things and psychic things and all of those things.
This is despite floating up to get the Tootsie Rolls.
Yes. See, I can't explain that. And I have a feeling, I don't feel that it really happened, although it feels like it did. Maybe it was the most vivid dream ever. But there is something that's happening recently that when it happens, and it's happened maybe 10, 15 times in the past couple of years.
Well, I'll call the insurance agent.
No, there are times when I'm thinking something, and you know how offbeat I think, like it's just
and then you turn on the radio and Rush Limbaugh saying the exact same thing.
No, my son will say something along either exactly the thing that's in my head or something else, like to the point where I think like telepathically we are exchanging things. Like yesterday I was going.
Was it I'm hungry?
No.
Because that just made me play in the odds.
They never have anything to do with the situation, which is why it's so weird.
Can I play Fortnite right now?
Right. If it was something like that, like, oh, I know he's going to ask for Fortnite because it always happens. No, it's just very like that time that you got when I asked you guys that question. Is anybody else thinking this? And you're like, no, who would be thinking that? Well, my son would be thinking.
Okay. Do you remember what the question was?
No, I don't. But yesterday, I was going to, and I never ever make. I never do this like that sort of thing. I never do that. I don't think
you just made Isaac the bartender handguns.
Yes. So I never ever do that.
Haley does finger guns.
Okay, I never do that though, and I can't. My son was saying something, and I was going to do it to him, but I didn't even move my hands yet. And he looked up at me, and he did it, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
I think that you guys are both.
Out of my head.
Your psychic energy is you're ready to move to Austin. You're ready to be hipsters. Has he announced his decision to grow a douchey little mustache?
He's a little young for a mustache.
When he can.
I'll get him a fake one I'll get him a merkin for his.
What the hell?
There's the part where it went too far. So, and has any of these
half the audience is going to the dictionary to determine if they should be offended or not.
I love that I didn't even need to. Neither Sean.
No, I knew the word because of
it's in a TV show or something or a movie. No,
Neil Young's album that he recorded.
Yeah, Merkinball.
Merkinball. That's right. That's where I learned that word.
Me too.
Wow. Okay, that's the story of our lives. All right, Dave, it's your turn.
Wait, hold on. I want to know. So, Dave, you write about a lot of supernatural and psychic phenomena in the books. So, is any of that sort of secondhand borrowed from any of these experiences? See, I think you're borrowing for real.
Want to believe too,
right? Like Fox Mulder.
Yeah. I mean, there's other things that have happened, and my grandfather told me some really creepy ass stories that, like, just like if it did happen, holy fuck. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I would love to have proof of any of the wild, crazy things that I think could happen, but typically I'm skeptical of.
Wait, you're skeptical?
Did I ever tell you guys about the guy that came into the gas station? I probably did a lot.
Yes, for sure.
Yes, I have heard that story. I've actually, oh my God, get out of my head. I've actually had the experience with a guy walking into a gas station once.
Okay, when I worked at one, fuck you. Johnny's doing finger guns. When I worked at the first gas station I worked at overnight, and it was just a booth. It wasn't a store, so like nobody came in. So there were like long hours of nothingness when it was dead. And what happened was this old man had started coming into the place, into the gas station, who would get gas, and he came like routinely, like every 4 days or so.
It's a good frequency.
Yeah. So enough that like he was a regular, but he didn't speak to me for a long time. And then one night he looks professional. He looks like he might be I don't know, investment banker or something. He looks like he's got money. He looks like he's intelligent. And I never got a crazy vibe off of him. Then one night he comes to me and he asks, he's like, "Do you ever notice the people that are using your phone booth behind you?" This is back when I had phone booths. And I'm like, well, people use them all the time. He's like, pay attention to them. I'm like, why? He's like, I'll tell you next time. So now I'm like,
I'm gonna do that when I'm rich. I'm just gonna randomly go in and just fuck with people.
Well, now I'm thinking maybe he's a like a retired cop, detective. I don't know. Like,
I thought you were gonna say he was a racist.
No. So I mean, typically, when you do see people using a phone booth a lot back then anyway, it was either people that didn't have a phone, because this is before cell phones, really.
But people with beepers selling drugs.
Or Superman.
Or drugs. Yeah, it was one of the two. And that was common and whatever. So
I used to crank call my girlfriend's house while we were out on payphones to prove that it wasn't me, because she thought I was doing it at home. And I'm like, look, you know for a fact I was out with my family at this time.
So over the course of several months, he drip feeds me little bits. I mean, he should be a storyteller. I mean, it was like Lost, really. Just little bits of.
How was the ending?
Well, the ending. We'll get to that in a second. So then he starts telling me about the cops using the phones. Keep an eye on the cops using the phone. Don't trust the cops that are using the phone. I'm like, what the fuck's he going on about? I'm like, why? He's like, I can't tell you now. So I'm like, okay. So I don't remember all the different shit he said, but a lot of it had to do with the phone booths. He was obsessed with those phone booths. So I was watching those fucking phone booths, and I'm like writing shit down.
What a way to fuck with Dave. He just knew you. He just knew you like we know you. And he walked in there, and he's like, I just got to tell this guy to watch the phone. That's it. That's better.
Part of it is when you are alone all night, and you're in a vulnerable place, because
right, he gave you an OCD upper decker is what he did.
Yeah. So I'm like thinking of all, because I did see crazy shit that happened there. I mean, regularly, like just random crazy shit would happen. So this guy giving this to me is not even that far off from what normally happens. So anyway, what happened was, for a while he doesn't come in. I'm like, what the fuck happened to the guy? I'm waiting for the rest of my story. So the gas station gets closed down, and they move me to another gas station across town. So I don't see this
one
guy.
Gas station closed down.
Are you going to ask what I'm going to ask, which is I didn't realize they had relocation programs. Did they pay for you moving?
It was a corporate store.
Well, I'm just like, okay, if I work at a gas station and the gas station closes, I'm thinking it's a sign from God that maybe I stop working at a gas station.
Hold on. How do we shuffle personnel to handle this one?
Well, if God was sending me a signal, I ignored it for 12 fucking years of my life. All right.
Was it because it was all that you could drink soda? Like, what was the draw? That,
or
like,
it was the night.
The gas station is closed. I'm going to work at another gas station.
Here's why I liked working at a gas station. I worked the midnight shift, and I'm naturally an insomniac, so it was easy for me to stay up. And I got paid a little bit more because I worked the night shift. Second, I didn't have to deal with people. If you work at a gas station on any shift other than the night shift,
no.
Your job is hell.
I don't even know why I ask you. I know who you are. I could have written that story myself.
So anyway, so I get transferred to this other gas station, and I don't see him. I see new weirdos and freaks, and for a while I worked during the day, and holy shit, that was awful. So one day I'm out at a store, and I run into this guy at the store, like in the parking lot. Like, yo! I don't even remember his fucking name. I don't even know if he ever told me his name. Like, dude, okay, I gotta ask, what the fuck were you talking about? I gotta know. I mean, I've been hanging for like a year and a half, probably. So then he goes on to tell me, I don't even remember everything he fucking told me. It was like an info dump.
My grandpa.
It was an info dump of the biggest conspiracy theories ever.
Okay, then just make it up right now. I think we need satisfaction.
Did you tell him to slow down and say,
I remember a little.
Don't talk in exposition.
He told me about how people pass secret messages in the libraries, how you have to watch the public address speakers and systems because they're broadcasting subliminal messages. And
Was it Rowdy Roddy Piper?
like they live, yeah. He didn't say tinfoil hat, but he said something along those lines to protect your brain. And at that point, I realized this guy is fucking crazy. But I had the thought, what if he wasn't? What if everything he said was legit? And that sort of began face, like some of the weirder shit that's in that.
Well, I don't want to alarm you, Dave, but there's a lot of shit that you said that we've decided that, oh my God, this guy's crazy. I mean, if you don't change your phone company or if you...
Wait. I've got a serious question. How many people do you think have been like, I met this guy one time, but the story is Dave? How many do you think he's the subject of like a lot of like lore around?
He certainly is around my kitchen table.
Around Redacted.
I saw this guy yelling in the parking lot at nobody.
And since he's only comes out at night and he's such a hermit, you know, they're like Bigfoot stories. Like you see him in the shadows in the background. All right. So
this just turned into worst show ever.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I think that this is simultaneously really interesting. I mean, I thought it was fun. And sort of a, you know, lesson in what the fertile ground for fiction. But I also thought that we should just take this episode, this exact same thing, and say, hey, Jim, put it on both feeds. And that way we serve both masters. I actually kind of like that idea.
Good idea. I do. I'm not even kidding. It makes sense.
All right.
And
so
what about the 5 people that listen to both shows?
Well, then they'll just think that it's a conspiracy theory.
Yes. Actually, there are secret subliminal messages sprinkled throughout the episode that only people that listen to both versions will be able to piece together the truth.
Yeah.
That's hot.
All right. So thanks for listening to the Story Studio. I know that we're going to have some guests.
Apologize after this episode.
No, I think that this was really good. I mean, maybe I'm crazy. Yeah, but I mean, we're taking stuff from our lives and applying it to our fiction in different ways. I think that this is why we don't usually have trouble having ideas. Like whether we can get them out, that's another question. But anyway, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, and I really like talking about the differences in our storytelling styles too, because I think that, you know, that is hard. It's once you find who you are as a storyteller, you can go faster and you can create better work in less time. And Dave's finishing up a draft this weekend, and our whole goal on the next draft.
Maybe next week.
Don't say that. Please don't say that. Because the whole premise here is that we're trying to get Dave to go, you know, like lubricate Dave. Like what is it?
Oh, I want to do that.
What can,
That's another episode.
grease the rails here so that it's just writing? Because I think that Johnny and I have done a really great job of kind of cracking that code, and we're getting better at it. And we're getting better at it with Dave too, but it is slower going. And I think that these are the elements that will really help, is figuring out what kind of story Dave can tell. And it might be a good idea to start tapping more into his own personal experience in some ways.
Anyway, so this has been Story Studio Podcast. Like I said, I think we're going to have some guests coming up soon with some cool stories of their own, which is kind of the whole point, right? Like, what are more stories that we can use to
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so thanks for listening to the Story Studio, and we will see you next time.
Adios.
Bye.
Are you sure you want to end the recording?